Sexby. We are glad to see you here. As members of Green Oil Sustainable Development Team, we are here to address some concerns you may have about our oil refinery being constructed on your river. At Green Oil, we're always looking to become more sustainable, more ecologically friendly. So, some issues we are going to talk about today are the political, economic, social, cultural, environmental, and personal impacts of the oil refinery. Just note that we take your concerns very seriously at Green Oil, and we will do everything in our ability to address them. Now, to turn it over to my colleague Josh Reinhardt to talk about some of the project background.
Thank you. The town of Saxby is located in the Bay of Fundy at the mouth of the Saxby River. The Green Oil Company places on planning a oil refinery and depot out of town on a 700-acre or 230-hectare area of forested land that will need to be cleared. The refinery will receive oil from Venezuela by way of tanker. Twice a week, a single tanker will bring in 500,000 barrels of crude oil, and the refined products will be shipped using three methods: trucks, tankers, and pipelines. The products will be sold to the Maritime Provinces, Quebec, and the northeastern U.S. But before we build anything, planning has to be done and registration or regulations have to be met. Here to talk about that is Eric.
Thank you, Josh. When building an oil refinery, there are many codes and regulations that we have to meet. What regulations do you think we have to follow? The Green Oil Company must follow both provincial regulations and federal regulations. Some of the provincial regulations include the New Brunswick Petroleum Products Storage and Handling Regulation from the Clean Environment Act and the Clean Water Act from the province of New Brunswick. The New Brunswick Petroleum Products Storage and Handling Regulation includes an environmental approval where an inspector will assess the sensitivity of the area where the refinery will be built. Some factors that the inspector will consider include the density and proximity of wells, the proximity of surface water bodies, the proximity of densely populated areas, and the presence in the area of geological, hydrogeological, or environment conditions, structures or animal, bird, aquatic, or plant life that necessitate the taking of unusual precautions to prevent pollution of the environment. The regulation also indicates how storage tanks should be located. For example, no storage tank can be located in an area that it is subjected to flooding. The area surrounding the tank must accommodate for accidental spillage, and the area must be surrounded with dikes according to the Clean Environment Act. The purpose of the Clean Water Act is to stop pollutants from being discharged into water systems and to provide a safe environment for fishing and swimming. The Act protects water systems including beds, banks, sides, shorelines, or any part of a river, creek, stream, spring, brook, pond, reservoir, canal, ditch, and wetlands, according to the Clean Water Act from the province of New Brunswick. We are not just going to follow these regulations. We will go above and beyond and ensure that our rare, precious ecosystem will not be at risk.
New oil refinery will have nothing but beneficial impacts on the economy. Some people might be concerned because it is placed in a 700-acre or 230-hectare area of forested land that is used by a sawmill that employs about 50 people. But the refinery will take up a minute fraction of the total area used by the sawmill and will employ 300 people, as well as 10,000 workers for construction for a period of 1 to 2 years. These workers are going to spend their money somewhere and will most likely spend it in the local businesses of Saxby, which will improve the local economy, making it a nicer town and will draw in more tourists. That is very important to the economy, considering that tourism is a $200 million a year industry in the Bay of Fundy area. Now, they may receive even more tourists because the Bay of Fundy is up for selection as one of the 7 natural wonders of the world. There are also concerns about pollution, as there are with the pulp mill up the river, and pulp mills are the 3rd largest polluter of land, air, and water, and that's why there are big concerns in that area. But we are making every effort to minimize our impact on the environment. There are also concerns about fisheries in the area, and that's understandable because the commercial fisheries in the area provide 3,500 jobs, and salmon alone bring in $30 million of income. So that's why we will take every precaution to not disturb these fisheries. This information came from the 2011 Canon Envirothon scenario, working together for sustainable development of an oil refinery on the Saxby estuary. That's how it will affect you economically. Now, to talk about the social cultural aspects, here's John.
On the Saxby and surrounding areas map, on the west side of the Saxby River is going to be the oil refinery. On the east side of the river is going to be the Chignecto Micmac First Nations Reserve. They depend on the Saxby River as a source of food, medicines, and ceremonial purposes, as stated in the description of the town of Saxby and of the surrounding area in the 2011 Canon Envirothon scenario handout. The Micmacs feel that their way of life and culture is at risk. The land that the oil refinery is going to be constructed on will be on the opposite side of the river of the Micmacs reserve. So their land is going to be untouched. They also use the Saxby River as a traditional food source, and if it becomes polluted, fish and other aquatic species will become scarce. The oil refinery is under strict guidelines to ensure that your river, the Saxby River, will remain clean and abundant as it is now. In the 1600s, Europeans settled into the Canadian estuaries and put dikes in to keep the salt water in the oceans and the fresh water inland, to convert salt marshes into freshwater marshes so that way they could grow agricultural crops. Now, scientists realize the devastating effects converting salt marshes into freshwater marshes has, and are restoring them back into salt marshes, leaving foresters and farmers at a loss of jobs and land. The oil refinery will create 300 jobs to help provide jobs for the unemployed farmers and foresters. The oil refinery is going to create new jobs in Saxby and will not disturb the peace and culture of the Micmac First Nations. The oil refinery will provide positive culture and social changes. It will also cause changes environmentally.
As an oil company, we generally have a reputation for having a general disregard of the environment. In reality, that's very far from the truth, and we're very conscientious of what we do in the environment. Without the environment, we wouldn't even exist, and our company would not be here today. One of our main concerns when we were thinking about putting in the refinery was what would happen to the Saxby River. We also realized that there would be problems with the forest, the soils, and the wildlife. Dangers to the Saxby River include oil spills and heat pollution. You may have heard about the oil spill that occurred in the Gulf of Mexico last year, and that was a terrible oil spill that lasted for about 3 months, and you might be worried that it will happen here. But why was that oil spill so bad? Well, in the Gulf of Mexico, an oil rig broke off, and an oil rig continually pulls oil up from the ocean bottom and brings it out to load ships. We would just be transporting oil with a ship with a defined amount of oil in it, so we would never ever see a spill of that caliber. Also, oil spills are very uncommon, and the likelihood of a spill occurring in the Bay of Fundy is very, very low. Heat pollution, another problem we realized, will be mitigated with the use of cooling ponds. Hot water exiting the refinery will go into ponds that are on site and be left there to cool, thus reducing the impact of the water on the river. Trees that we will cut down make up only a small part of the total forest that they're coming from, and so it will not create a major dip in the forest volume or the forest health, purely because of the relative size of the area that's being cut compared to the total area of the forest. Also, piping oil through the forest could create fragmenting. This would be very bad for the forest health, so I'll explain in a minute how we'll solve that. Soil runoff is a problem that occurs in both clear-cutted areas and construction sites. So to limit this, we will first create a riparian buffer zone on the part of the construction facing the river, and also construction will begin as soon as the trees have been cut to limit the amount of time that the soil is exposed. The wildlife was taken into account when considering when to cut, and it was decided that the cut would be in midsummer, because in midsummer, one, the animals were most active, and also there would be fewer birds that were migrating. I won't pretend disrupting animals is a good thing, but the animals will most easily make the transition in midsummer. Also, wildlife movement may be impeded by any pipelines that run through the forest. So, to solve this, we'll place the pipelines in routes similar to those of the roads. By placing them by roads, we will accomplish three things. First of all, the wildlife movement will not be hurt, which is very important to hunters and trappers. Second, the pipeline may actually help stop moose crossings along the roads. And third, the forest will not be unnecessarily fragmented. On a slightly different note, we're going to use steam coming from the refinery as a source of alternative energy. As the steam comes out of the refinery, it will pass through a set of turbines and it will spin them. This will create energy, and the energy will be used to augment the refinery's power needs. As this refinery is built, you might be wondering how it affects you directly. Well, to help you understand that, we'll now hear the personal side of things.
On a personal level, some members of the community are concerned that since the factory is being built on Crown land, that it may be government sponsored or government funded. Do you know how much funding we've received from the government? None. We've received exactly $0.00. So, that being said, you don't have to worry about your taxes increasing on our account. Another concern is by the fishermen with the new increased oil tanker traffic that it may disrupt fish populations in the area. But this won't pose a big problem, as we'll only be having one oil tanker coming through twice a week. So fish populations will not be disturbed that often. Another concern is with the whale population around the Bay of Fundy. There are 8 different species in the area, and they're a big draw for tourism and for just recreational enjoyment. So since whales and oil tankers do not get along, we'll be studying their migration and feeding patterns so as to try to avoid any unnecessary and unfortunate collisions. And to talk about some of the other ideas that were brought up during the planning process, here is Eric.
Thank you, Jake. Up to this point, you have heard our perspective on this topic, but other ideas were considered. For example, such as building our pipelines through forested land and across agricultural areas. After some consideration, we decided to build our pipelines along major roads and highways because it would be least detrimental to the environment and it would be easier to access for maintenance. And with more maintenance on our pipelines, the least likely the lines will spill. Another idea we had was to dump the water we use for cooling right back into the Saxby River. After some discussion, we decided to construct cooling ponds to dump the water into. These ponds would store the used up water and it would filter out any contaminants that may exist before we dump it back into the Saxby River. These were our original ideas. Here's our final plan.
Here at the Green Oil Company, your concern is our concern. We'll create cooling ponds to reduce the temperature of the water before releasing it back into the Saxby River. We will allow the public to visit our oil refinery to see how it works and operates. We will do our construction in the summer. We will reroute pipelines along major roads and highways. We will follow regulations set by the federal and provincial governments. We will live the Mi'kmaq culture undisturbed. We will avoid whales. We will also put grates at the end of our intake pipes to stop small aquatic species from going into the pipes. Now for our conclusion.
By now, I hope we've impressed on you how much we truly care about the environment. And as a reminder of those things, here's a review of what we talked about. First of all, I'd like to note that the oil refinery is not close to the river of the mouth of the river, and therefore would not impede any whale watching due to an unsightly refinery. It's actually in the middle of the river, closer to Moncton. Politically, we will follow all relevant rules and regulations and go above and beyond on them. Economically, we're creating thousands of jobs short-term, and hundreds of jobs long-term that are very well-paying. Socioculturally, we are allowing for the Mi'kmaq to continue their lifestyle undisturbed, and we are creating jobs for any unemployed farmers or foresters. Environmentally, we're taking every precaution to limit our effects. Personally, you will be only positively affected as we pump money into your economy. And we have 8 ways to limit our effects. The reason our plan is so comprehensive, your concern is our concern.
This concludes our presentation, and we would like now to entertain the judges with any questions they may have.
All right, so you're going to have 10 minutes. And I'll let you guys know 2 minutes left.
Well, thanks very much for a very interesting presentation.
Thank you.
We all certainly appreciate the effort and the planning you've put in terms of environmental protection concerns, trying to minimize risk. But the reality is, under the best plans and best scenarios, sometimes things don't quite go the way you would like to see them go. So my question to you is, what have you put in place for measures, maybe take a minute to talk about, is should the worst case scenario happen, and let's just say that you have a major rupture in your pipeline. So maybe just sort of think about that in terms of how and what measures you have put in place to deal with that terrible potential issue.
You guys like to talk about this?
However you want to.
I'd like to ask for clarification. So you're asking specifically what would happen if the oil pipeline on land ruptures? Is that, or are you asking?
Okay, I'll leave that open to you, because you've got the pipeline, so it could be either adjacent to the water or inland, right? Because it's going to be running for considerable distance.
Yes, we'd like to have it running parallel to the roads.
The roads, yeah.
So.
Fair enough.
To talk about it. Should we shut off?
Okay, well, first of all, the oil pipeline will be close to the roads, so that way there is a major oil spill. It's easy to access, so that way we can stop it. And
Another thing is the pipeline, like design of the pipeline. You have it, you have sensors throughout it, and it'll be compartmentalized in case there is a breach in one area. It'll seal off immediately and stop flow. That way you don't have it continuously pumping out. You only have a small section of pipe that the oil is in that leaks out.
Also, if any oil gets into the water, there are various measures to keep it, or to remove it quickly. We have nets that can catch it. They float on the top because the oil is up there and it blocks it, and you can scoop it out that way. If it's in the land, you can remove the dirt and replace it with new dirt. It's labor intensive, but it's how they do it. And there's also detergents as a last measure in the water.
So we will spend as much money, as much effort as it takes to fix the problem.
And a big oil disaster requires a giant cleanup crew, which means that all that cleanup crew needs someplace to eat and someplace to sleep, which means the town of Saxby will actually have a better economy with more people in it. And 80% of the oil that spills out is usually easy to capture and get rid of the environment. It's usually just like the last 20% that requires the greatest effort trying to get rid of.
Does that answer your question sufficiently?
Okay.
I'm going to ask the next question. Very good job, by the way. You did mention the First Nations people and that they would not be affected. However, there's always going to be things, for example, they are right across the river and they will see your oil refinery from their shore. And plus the new busyness on the waterway, noise from tankers or just unsightliness. Do you have any contingency plans or mitigations that you would, how you would deal with those kind of things?
Yeah, I do realize that it's right across from the Indian Reserve, so they will be seeing it and the traffic. And, you know, it's not on the Indian Reserve, and the main disturbance that they will see is the site of the oil refinery across the river and the oil traffic coming in and out. Their fishing the river will not be greatly disturbed. I do realize, you know, that they will be seeing the oil reserve, and we will try our best to cooperate with the First Nations so that way we can, so that way they can continue their cultural beliefs.
John, may I add?
Yes.
Also, to limit the unsightliness of it, it would be very easy to plant fast-growing trees followed by slower-growing trees just to block their sight of it. The most hurtful thing, I suppose, would just be the sound that they could hear, and that would just require a slight distance away from it.
And you mentioned your concern about the oil tanker traffic. We will only be having one tanker, and it'll be going up the river one day and down the river after it's loaded, so it'll only be going on the river actually twice a week. So I'm not sure how large of a problem that would pose, and to that there really isn't too much you can do about having an oil tanker, because you need to bring in the shipments of oil to be refined and send it out, the processed material out.
Back to me. Okay, I probably don't have much time left, so I'll speak very quickly. I'm concerned that when you have a development the size of an oil refinery, that there's a lot of associated development that comes with it. You need the infrastructure, the services, the people that are going to move into the area. What about the scope of that plan? Is there some thoughts on how you're going to address the overall development in the region, the impact it will have?
I would like to just make sure I understand the question completely again. So you're concerned about the secondary development that will come with the construction of this facility?
That's right. And you talk very much about the pros of that development in terms of the economy, but there must be some cons too.
Well,
The local area has been in kind of a decline, so there won't be too much expansion needed because there's like empty areas for people to come into. So there won't be as much expansion required.
Also, the refinery is separate of the city, and as such, the biggest development that we would see besides the actual creation of the refinery would be roads. As long as those aren't going through any strong forest habitat, there wouldn't be major fracturing or fragmentation.
Okay.
So I'll grab one. Climate change may mean that the Bay of Fundy water comes up by at least a meter in the next 35 years. Does the company have any thoughts about how it would accommodate that change in sea level rise, since it's a coastal facility?
will you give us a moment to discuss it?
Yeah.
main solution to this would be placing just higher dikes. It's a meter is 3 feet. It's about that long, and so the addition of that wouldn't be terribly difficult to do. We have other parts also.
We should also move the oil storing things back just to limit any possible spillage into the bay.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you guys for your questions.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thanks.